Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Politicast. Today I'm joined with The Right Opinion.
Hello, I'm The Right Opinion. However, to out with too much free time here on the Politicast, I don't know how to introduce myself, so I'm just reading off my old scripts.
What do you say in your intro, by the way? Because I've been watching your videos for a while now, and I'm never quite sure what you say. I know you say home and twat.
The home of a twat with too much free time.
Home of a twat. All right, okay, I get it now. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about noncery on YouTube. I'm not sure how common the use of that word is, but that is going to be the first topic of the video. And then we're going to get on to Martin Shkreli as well. We're going to start talking about the case of trolls recently, and also the case of just general pedophilia allegations that go about on Twitter and on, in case of YouTubers.
Yeah.
And I was wondering your opinion on this, because I've always seen what's been going on with, people like Lionmaker, people like, we've had someone quite recently in the community. I'm not going to name names, but I'll get onto that later. And I was wondering, do you think to a certain extent that Twitter and YouTube is a platform for such a thing? More so than, just generally any kind of other form of fame where it's kind of harder to get in touch with those that you admire or idolize.
Yeah. I've actually did a video on this, and what I said in it is that when you idolize someone, it's a lot easier to become infatuated and maybe do things that you wouldn't normally do with a stranger. Like, you're taught at school to be scared of scared, whatever you want to call it, of catfish and people who are going to try and basically act as a 15-year-old kid and befriend you and go round to your friend's house, etc., etc., etc. What they don't tell you is that public figures can be just as threatening and just as twisted in their desires. And when people idolize them in a way, I think it allows the idols themselves to exploit that. And you've seen that with Lionmaker, and you've seen that with Austin Jones more recently, who actually used a lot of his prestige and fame to basically get his fans to send him nude underage pictures.
I think it's a very important point to be made, actually. It's a perspective I hadn't really thought about myself, is that, especially in the case of when a creator dies or a content creator dies, I always feel quite weird about that, because all of a sudden, the videos stop, and at the end of the day, they're human. And I hadn't really thought about it in the perspective that when you know someone for their content, you idolize them for their content, even in a sexual way, you still cannot imagine the possibility of them doing anything, because it's almost like they're this kind of metaphysical being, is a thing I'd always thought. I remember when I was younger, and I'm not sure if you remember Eddsworld, but the creator of Eddsworld died, and they made a video for him when he died, and I was just so shocked to the point where, a YouTuber could die, because I've never experienced that before.
It is really surreal when someone like that isn't in your life anymore. And I think that is a large issue that plagues YouTube. And I do believe that there are a fair proportion of people who are a bit twisted and just keep their desires to themselves. And in a way, I obviously, obviously it's not fantastic, it's not brilliant, but if they keep it to themselves, then, so be it. What the issue is when some of these creators get that fame and get that prestige and get the fans groveling at their feet, and they realise that they can do now whatever the fuck they want.
Do you reckon they do it because they actually have begun with those feelings, or they actually are nonces or paedophiles or whatever word you want to use? Or do you think it's because of just the fact that they're just receiving a lot of attention, they can turn to what they turn to what they can achieve naturally and easily? Do you reckon it's more of a case of that, or out of repressed desires?
I mean, it's a hard one. Obviously, I mean, it makes it to speak about it from common sense's point of view, I'd be surprised if necessarily the people like Austin Jones don't have a choice of buttholes to look at, to the point where he was basically from what I understand, he spoke to multiple underage girls, and I guess in a way you could say yes, it was just him taking what he could get, but he could get older adults no problem too. Like,
it's true.
Like,
I think Austin Jones is one of the cases where I would say there was something else there.
Oh, definitely.
Especially like in his mentality. I think there was something else there with Austin Jones because it felt so kind of because he was the one who released the videos of what he wanted, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He was like releasing videos of girl. Well, yeah.
Exactly.
We know all that already, but I find that probably more extreme than some other cases we've had of this online.
I mean, there have been like a few cases where people have gone into like an odd relationship or something, but it's just weird to me. It is bizarre to me how some people are just willing to just go out of their way to break the law, basically, just to get a nude that they could probably get from someone who is of age. Yeah, and that's what bemuses me the most, really, that they're willing to put their whole career on the line for an underage nude. And so you have to have something there at that point if you're willing to sacrifice your whole artistic integrity like someone like Austin Jones. And we can get to the other examples too.
What I wanted to ask, to take a little tangent from that, is in terms of before, well, I also want to get onto rape allegations as well, and allegations in general. But I wanted to know on your actual general opinion on paedophilia. I might seem to a viewer like a pretty obvious question, but I'm interested to hear on your opinion on whether or not you think it's, it might be a mental illness or even a sexuality, because I've had discussions like this recently and it's quite interesting to see, how people, perceive it.
It's certainly not something to be taken pride of necessarily. I think the issue with paedophilia, and this is what makes it not on the level of every other, basically, most other sexual attractions. If you're fucking bestiality too, that's a bit weird. I mean, obviously it's a bit weird and a bit fucked to begin with. But the larger issue is that there is no instance in which children should ever be used for sexual objects.
That's precisely the way I see it as well. I think there's a large difference between offending paedophiles and non-offending paedophiles. I do see it as a sexuality, but if it's a sexuality that infringes upon the rights of someone who does not have a choice, and like morally have a choice, especially in the case of, underage people, then I think it's most definitely an issue.
In all honesty, I do think, like, if anyone like is in a way a paedophile, I think it is important to in a way get help, because I don't know, like, for example, like if there is help available, but I think it is important to make sure self-control is emphasized.
I've actually got an extra point to make on this now that you brought up help. I think it'd be quite an interesting place to take this. Is in Germany, they have almost a form of conversion therapy, or at least ways to control any urges someone might have, and it's a public and it's an anonymous system. So anyone can enter it if they've had any issues, and nothing will ever get out about it. But an interesting thought I had about this is, in what way can this be kind of compared to the issue of conversion therapy in the United States? And I know that there's it's a lot more offensive. If we're going to call it a sexuality, it's clearly a lot more offensive sexuality. But I was just wondering your opinions on what you thought about that comparison.
I mean, it is a really interesting one. Obviously, if someone doesn't want to obviously it's an option. And if someone genuinely like hates being attracted to children, and it's understandable.
I can understand why someone would feel that way.
Then obviously it is also understandable that they may want to seek help. Now, with that said, I don't think it's necessarily good to do certain conversion therapies. I don't understand exactly how it works, how conversion therapies always work, but I do think it should be a lot more of a mental exercise rather than the old classic, let's knock the electrodes on you and zap the gay away, or zap whatever they want away in America.
I don't think that's the way they do it.
They don't do it. They don't do it like that anymore.
Yeah. No, I was thinking with the case in Germany, I think it's more than anything, it's just about the controlling of the urges rather than change. Because I think now it's quite a controversial opinion to think you can change someone's sexuality, which I think is the right way of looking at
definitely.
it. I don't think it is completely
No,
possible
I
to
don't.
change someone's sexuality.
It's not like one of those things that it's just that if you want it, it's there. And I think that there are limits to obviously what freedom brings us, and obviously freedom, in a way, personal freedom, doesn't necessarily give you license over other people's freedoms.
Precisely.
And therefore, as someone who is a classic, very libertarian, I just like, if people want to and the choice is there, then they can do it, and that's their decision in a way.
I agree with that.
But I do agree that I do think it is exceptionally hard to change your sexuality, although I do believe that there are probably some people who probably get done by the placebo effect and just like genuinely like think, oh well, I'm converted now, because they really wanted it to work.
That's very true.
There are a lot of like people who have claimed their sexuality has changed through conversion therapy, but you can't tell. You can never, you can't measure someone's sexuality. It's immeasurable. You can't stick a barometer to it and say, oh well, they're 80% gay. So even if they say their sexuality has changed, you don't really know, because someone may deceive themselves into thinking their sexuality, and I can speak from experience there.
Oh, no, in terms of sexuality, then, just to take another tangent slightly, do you think that anyone can be entirely straight, entirely one thing or the other?
I don't know. But it's one of those. It's one of those things. As I said, it's immeasurable, and that's why I hate the debate on it. They're saying, well, you can be 10% straight, 90% gay, but for me, sexuality is just categoric, because that's so much easier and makes much more sense, and you don't have to go through this. And I don't know if anyone's ever entirely straight. I don't know if people deceive themselves. We can't tell if that is the case. What we can tell is that some people identify the sexuality as straight, some people identify the sexuality as gay, some identify the sexuality as bisexual, some asexual, and some whatever else they want.
Well, the amount that there's out there now, there's demisexual,
there's...
demisexual's the one where you have to be romantically interested in someone first.
Such bollocks though. Like for me, I am a lot more of a romantic person, and so I guess that makes me demisexual.
I'm proud of you. This is the first time we're hearing of it on this podcast.
But that should be like a trait of love. For a lot of people in love. I know some people just like to bone left and right and centre. But it's natural for many people to have to build a romantic connection to other people, before they decide that they want to have sex. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't get the I don't know why those people need their own sexuality. I just feel like it's them making up their own sexuality to feel special. For me, yes, I tend to, I almost certainly need to be romantically attracted to people to feel any inclination whatsoever. But
yeah, I'm just going to check that I've got the definition of demisexual correctly.
I think you do. I think you do, because you got demisexual, you got
yes.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure you do. No, I'm pretty sure you do, and because I remember the others mostly.
Yeah.
I just don't understand.
It gets to a certain extent where if you're talking about case scenarios of when you can be sexually attracted to someone, I could try and make my own sexuality for only enjoying doggy style with leprechauns.
Exactly.
It kind of gets to that certain extent.
Everyone has their own muse.
I'm not saying that's mine, by the way. Just to clarify, I'm not having that one on public record.
Everyone has their own muse, and sexuality, in a way, is a helpful tool to understand those general muses. That's not really a sexuality to me. That's just a trait of their attraction. Basically, it can be anyone, but it has to be feeling. So I understand that. I guess it makes sense, but it's not really a new sexuality. It's just their sort of personal muse, isn't it? It's a bit of a non-issue to me. I mean, it's not really a sexuality. It's like a sexuality for me is like what you're attracted to, in a way, who you're attracted to.
So essentially, what demisexual is just pansexual, but you've got to buy me flowers first.
Yeah.
Is that
basically
essentially
it? Yeah, basically it. I think that homosexual, bisexual, if you want pansexual, although I don't necessarily think it makes too much clear difference at that point.
Yeah, but I think at that point you start getting into the gender argument as well, which is something we're going to say
exactly
for another video.
I know it is for another video. Bisexual, pansexual, heterosexual, and I think that's fine. Like, that's who you're attracted to. If you're attracted to, I guess, animals, then you can have another sexuality. I guess whatever floats your boat. Just don't do it anywhere in my house.
Or leprechauns. Don't forget leprechauns.
Being attracted to mythical creatures, I'm sure we can create your own little safe space, mates.
To take this back to the topic at hand, though, in terms of paedophilia, and we were talking about the kind of form of conversion therapy, or at least learning to control urges. Here's a bit of a moral issue for you. How would you feel, because I've seen another case of this in the news recently, about child sex robots? Not you for your personal use. Okay. Just to clarify.
I don't know. It's a hard one. It is because it is absolutely fucked. It is absolutely fucked. Make no mistake.
But at the same time, it almost does more good than harm. Is the way I read into it.
I guess on balance, collateral damage, if it stops anything from happening to real children, then I could probably see it as a plus, but I guess it depends. I'm not really a paedophile myself, so I can't really understand how they think. It's really hard to say exactly, and you never really want to fulfill such a twisted pleasure, but as someone who has actually gone through the experience, I know that I wouldn't really wish it on anyone else. And I don't know, it depends if the child sex robots prevent that. The only thing I would obviously say is that it would have to be something kept behind very closed doors, and it should not be normalised by any other method to society.
It's an interesting one, though, because it's when the political issue and a legal issue becomes a moral issue as well. So it's to what extent can you say, oh, yeah, it might be a sexuality, but if someone ever said to you, okay, you got to go deliver this child sex robot to someone, it's would you ever do that? Simply out of your own morals again, that's fucked up.
But at the end of the day, child sex robots, they'll find a way. It doesn't matter if we say yes, no, whatever to it. They'll find a way to move it into their houses if they're really that desperate for sex. Child porn is completely illegal, completely disgusting, but everyone could get their hands on it.
The next point I wanted to make was about Trollsus. That's been all over Twitter at the moment recently. Yeah. I think he made a video where he said the allegations that were made against him have been cleared, which is good. That's obviously a good thing. But my question to you was, what should the public discourse be at this point? Because some people are making memes referring to the fact that there was textual proof that, that it did happen, that they don't agree with the fact that the case has been dropped. And I was wondering what your opinion on that was.
It's a really tricky one because I don't know the individual personally who made the claims. I do know a lot of people who are in touch with her, and the proof itself, looking at the evidence, pretty damning stuff. So for me, the case to be dropped with that sort of accumulation of texts that were fairly seem legitimate, because she did a video in which she actually scrolled through the text to prove that they were legitimate. I always take the position that innocent until proven guilty, but there was evidence that I was almost thinking well, how do you refute that? How do you defend an action like that?
It's one of those things where for me, it's, as you were saying, innocent until proven guilty. And there are definitely cases where people get away with this kind of stuff. There's also cases where things are taken too far. The whole regret isn't rape style thing. I'm not going to get into that for this case because I just do not know enough about it. I don't know the messages. I just know the response and the aftermath. But my point is, or the kind of the discussion I want to be had, is that as a public figure, take the case of someone like Tobuscus, for example, who had the allegations made against him that he was cheating. I remember there being a rape allegation or, some form of emotional or physical abuse. But then it was dropped. And he was from the get-go saying this did not happen. The proof of it was proven incorrect.
Yeah, definitely.
But at the same time, the amount of shit that he went through, the amount of stuff that he experienced as a person, and the hit his career took from
Definitely,
it,
without a doubt.
I find that absolutely astounding.
I think that Tobuscus is a really good example of when matters really should be taken to the police.
You know, for this person, obviously his career was dropping ever since 2010, and gaming isn't quite what it used to be on YouTube, that's for sure. But at the same time, I really think that something of this magnitude, something that is so frowned upon for good reason, should not be made public, at least until the allegations are confirmed.
Definitely.
And there's action being done about it. Because people like Tobuscus still probably receive shit about what happened.
Oh, yeah.
When it might not have happened at all. And I find that crazy. I still think to the point that allegations should never be publicized in a video. Because at the end of the day, the videos we put on YouTube or the videos we put on Twitter, they should never be of that magnitude. Because the amount of damage you can do to people, even, famous or not famous, is beyond what you can imagine, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's really true. I think that one of the largest issues that was faced down with the Tobuscus allegations is that it was just completely jumped on, and everyone jumped the gun on publicizing it and framing it and completely dramatizing the situation before anything was really proven. And I was always skeptical of the Tobuscus case. I never really bought it. And in a way, you can, for me, like, I have like a sixth sense that I can tell when someone's telling the truth or not. And for me, everything was so emotionally manipulative and so contrived and purposefully written. It was too media fit to be true. It was too well done to be true in a way. The first thing I would rather do is not necessarily use it to accentuate my victimhood.
I also found like the majority of videos that were made about it, it felt like the only proof that people had weren't actually about the allegations, but merely his personality.
Oh, definitely.
Because, I mean, obviously, the allegations made about him would make him you wouldn't want to touch him, you wouldn't want to go near him or watch his videos, anything. But the allegations made about his personality still were, they didn't put him in the nicest light, but didn't necessarily mean he was a morally awful person. No. But I think people latched onto the allegations people were making about the fact that he was just quite weird or would say odd things every now and then and go, oh my God, what a rapist, what an abusive man. And I think that's one of the scary things about public allegations is that, especially, to go back to the idolization of public figures, which we spoke about at the beginning of this episode. When you watch someone daily, weekly, whatever, for a long amount of time, you agree with everything they say. For example, if you've got a subscriber, you personally, from half a year ago, you come out during this and say, demisexuals, they are stupid, that is not a sexuality, that there is a chance that one of them might go up to someone who's demisexual and go like, shut up, without finding their own opinion. I don't necessarily mean this is a bad thing, especially when your opinion's always right. Sorry, I had to throw that in there. But, in that sense, I think it's that's what's so scary about public allegations. Because no matter what you say, even if you have no proof, even if you fake the DMs, even if there are no DMs and you just say there are, there's still going to be a proportion that go over and just tell that person to kill themselves.
Oh yeah, mob mentality is such a terrible thing. This is another discussion that I've had with many people. There's a very clear difference between a group of people making up their own mind and doing something together and a group of people basically going with the crowd and doing it together. And often the latter is often a lot more incorrect. Now, I'm not saying there haven't been instances when it's paid off and that it's been right, but that's not because of the mob mentality. And I think the Tobuscus thing is an exceptional demonstration of when it can go severely wrong. And another really, really good example of when it can go severely wrong is when the paedophile allegation against that RuneScape YouTuber, and everyone just swarmed his channel without a moment of thought for what the actual situation could be. And at the end of the day, it was just fake news. You know, I don't have like anything against Keemstar for it, because at the end of the day, you know, it was a stupid thing to do, but you know, he's reimbursed him, and he's done everything to make up for that. And at the end of the day, the guy who was attacked, as bad as it was, has probably came out of it with a net positive outcome. But obviously, that was an exceptional demonstration of when mob mentality can go really wrong, and especially with the Tobuscus case too, when you have a really dedicated fan base, and dedicated fan bases aren't necessarily a bad thing. If you get a cult status and a dedicated fan base, you can get a lot of longevity on the YouTube platform. But it also means you have to be careful with how you use it, or else you end up with a mob mentality where you say one thing that could be taken subjectively, and some people take it the completely wrong way and then go and completely flood another person's channel with hate and abuse. But, you know, if I was in Tobuscus' position after all that, I would have been going for slander, because you say someone raped you, or it was a rape allegation, wasn't it? And if you are to make a false rape allegation against someone to basically defame their character and defame their name, that is slander. And if that is then disproved, I would be going for the counter case, and I understand that some people would just like not do it out of exhaustion.
And also legal fees and stuff like that, is whether you want to get into that.
But in a way, I just, you know, if I'd be pissed off. You know, this person, in a way, I wouldn't necessarily do it for myself. I'd do it to try and get some justice served, and to know that people shouldn't be able to get away with that. And in a way, I think that there should be more help for individuals who are wrongly accused of crimes, because the damage, as you say, that it does is beyond belief. I think it would be really useful if there was some system in place that doesn't mean you have to necessarily sue for slander, and the state should, because, or the state or the county or the government or whatever legislative body can, because at that point, slander is surely a crime, in my opinion.
I think it's what we're in a place right now on a universal level where rape cases, there's so much discourse about are they lying, are they asking for it, you know, there's those claims going on, and now people are saying stuff like, oh, what happens if it doesn't happen? You just put this person through so much hell, whereas beforehand people might not have really realized this. And I think we're getting to a stage now, as we are with equality in general, where I think people are slowly starting to think of both sides rather than just the victim side as well, because there is a certain point where the person who the allegations are made against, they can become a victim, especially if those allegations are proven to be false.
But in a way, I'm starting to, like, talking about it, I'm starting to reach crossroads where I'm like, well, is it really something people should be suing for, or is it something that should genuinely not be necessarily a let's sue than a let's actually make a legislative body to actually deal with this without having to cost the people? Because at the end of the day, a victim of slander is still a victim, and they shouldn't have to basically scoop out thousands, probably tens of thousands of pounds or dollars or whatever currency you want to use in legal fees just to try and gain some dignity back for themselves.
I think the other thing, though, is to what extent does it become too far? If there were to be legislation put in place that could allow someone who is the victim of false allegations or a victim of slander to hit back, at what point does that make people who are victims of actual sexual abuse, at what point does that put them off making a legal case against someone, in case they may not believe that their proof may be enough?
It's one of those things that there has to be, like, because for your example, the Tobuscus case, you said, to my understanding, that because that's why I was using this discussion and discourse, that basically the allegations were proven to be false.
I'm not sure if the allegations were proven to be false. I just think that the accusations that someone made were brought back.
I think in one of those instances, just because something isn't proven to be true doesn't mean it's not true. It just means the court couldn't necessarily find proof that it is true. What I'm saying is that I think that if you're fabricating false accusations publicly and there is proof that it is falsely created, then there should be legal action taken against you. Currently, the only thing that can be taken against you by the state, I believe, is wasting police time.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you don't go to the courts and you don't waste police time, then you can't be apprehended. In my opinion, making a false accusation on such a level should be punishable, and a victim could well be reimbursed, because you don't have to go to the court of law to get a public platform.
Okay, so after the discussion we just had about accusations on YouTube and towards creators and towards people in general, I thought it would be quite interesting to go into something more universal, a topic that anyone can get their teeth sunk into. Something that's been on the news quite recently is the case of Martin Shkreli, or Farmer Bro, or Farmer Douche, whether or not you love him or you hate him. I thought he'd be interesting to talk about because, as I said, people have very mixed opinions about him. If you don't know who he is, he's infamous for the fact that he raised the price of a life-saving drug by more than 5,000%, which is fucking crazy. But we'll probably discuss this and his recent court case in the coming minutes. I wanted to know your opinion on him generally.
I have to say, as a person, he seems a little insecure. I feel that, in a way, his price hike of the drugs, or his company's, Turing's, I believe, price hike of the drugs, was meant to go rather under the radar. And when it received all this attention and publicity, I feel like he kind of got a bit uncomfortable with how much people hated him.
I'm not surprised, to be honest.
And I think that, in a way, has triggered him to try and, like, be the kind of cool uncle that's not really that cool.
You couldn't have hit it more spot on, really.
So, in a way, I kind of feel like he's just like a cheeky opportunist who basically got caught up in his own attempt to fuck people over and is now trying to meme his way out of it.
Yeah, that's very much the use of the word meme as a verb there is spot on.
Yeah.
What he's been... I've got 2 tweets right here about the extra relevant Harambe meme, and he says, "You'll want Harambe back so bad, I'll genetically engineer his ass and shoot him again." And then he goes, "Okay, fine, you guys want me to use my powers for good instead of evil, prepare for the resurrection of Harambe." And I think, to a certain extent, trying to win over people who, have been hating on him ever since 2015 and the price rise, I think it's an interesting case, especially because people do like him. There are people that like him.
Oh yeah, no, and I guess if you kind of like the sort of ballsy opportunist, then I guess I can understand why people see him as someone to aspire to. But I unfortunately, and this is the line I always take. I'll always jump at opportunity to make money as long as it really doesn't involve screwing people over. And I feel that a lot of the reports, especially the ones that we outlined pre-episode, that you could probably cite now, seem to demonstrate that regardless of how Turing or Shkreli defended the actions, there were people being fucked over very badly because of it.
Not even people in general, babies is the one that really kind of tweaked me when I was reading up on the statistics. I've got another quote here. At a Senate hearing on drug pricing last week, a doctor who treats babies with life-threatening toxoplasmosis testified that a course of treatment with Daraprim, the drug that was increased in price by 5,000%, went from about $1,200 to no less than $69,000. I'm not sure if he's done that on purpose to be Farmer Bro. Getting in that cheeky 69 is probably what he wanted to do at that point. If you take his tweets into account, I can completely understand the hate he's received. Even, online or perhaps even in person, it would not surprise me. And if anything, the charges made against him, which are actually for claims that he defrauded multiple investors.
Securities fraud.
I think it's almost Karma Bro. And I came up with that pun right off the spot. But at the same time, seeing that he's experienced that makes me feel like this has kind of reached a happy ending. Not that, these people are still getting screwed over here because there's no real competition to this Daraprim drug. But from an outsider perspective, there has been some kind of karma that's been dished out in this case.
The way I see it is just his actions just aren't really very respectable. And even if they're legal and fair and so be it, it's like someone says oh, but they're allowed to do it.
It doesn't make it right.
It doesn't make it right, exactly. And that's what I said, like, you know, with the United Airlines scandal a fair few months ago. You know, people were like, but they're allowed to do it. It's in their contract. Like, just because they're allowed to do something doesn't make it good or beneficial or right or correct, etc., etc., etc. And I think that's my problem with Shkreli. Like, what he did, you know, okay, he wants the money, but I can't really defend it as a humane moral action. And if you want to be like the stone hard capitalist, like, yes, money. He knows, he's got a brain. He's got a solid head on top of his shoulders. I mean, okay, fair enough, but there's no real action defending the damage that it's done, and I don't think I could really side with him on the issue just because the way it probably affects people.
I think the important thing about this debate is that we've both done our independent research on this, and we've both come into this podcast knowing slightly what the other one thinks about this man. But the fact that we've reached a conclusion so quickly, and we've even, I before we started this podcast, we both brought up a different example, both to do with Bernie Sanders. My one was that in a video that he made public, there was a Bernie Sanders doll right behind him, and it looked so placed, so contrived that doll would be there, that he was picking up on the fact that a lot of young people, a lot of people that use the internet, a lot of the people that would be aiming hate his way on social media are young people who are more likely to like Bernie Sanders. And then what you said to me about the fact, I'm not sure if you want to say it yourself.
Oh yeah, I know. I think he donated just shy of $3,000 to Bernie Sanders' campaign after Bernie Sanders called him something not very nice. I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something to do with Shkreli's greed, and Shkreli responded by donating money to Sanders' campaign. He always seems to like try. I mean, in a way, I feel like he wants to be liked and he wants to be popular, and now he's got all this hate coming his way. He just wanted to get away with it scot-free, and now he's not. He's just gonna try and like be cool and hip, and he supports Bernie Sanders, and it's weird. It is really weird. It's very bizarre.
I find the supporting Bernie Sanders point quite funny though. For someone that's paid $5 million in bail, the fact that he only gave less than $3,000 to Bernie Sanders' campaign, I find that incredible.
I mean, in a way, like it's exactly that. It's almost like he just donated a bit. He just wanted to get the donation down. He just wanted to see it up on his name. He just wanted his name to Bernie Sanders' campaign, because it's not much. It's not election winning money.
No, I think it's he's certainly an interesting man, and even then in that case, you know, we're talking about someone who wants to be liked. If you want to be liked, then it's clear to see why he's gone on the H3 podcast, even on a phone call. You got the amount of people that have cases made against them, very public cases, and the fact they'll just kind of go off the radar, as they probably should, as they probably want to do for their own mental health.
Yeah.
The fact that he's popped onto a YouTuber's podcast to drop some dank memes, it blows my mind. But moving on from him, because I think, you know, there's, as you were talking earlier, if we go back to when you were saying about how just when you're allowed to do something, your government or legislation in your country allows you to do something, doesn't mean it's morally right or it's the way it should be. I wanted to hear your opinion on public versus private healthcare, just to finish this episode off. How do you feel about the fact that this kind of thing, what Martin Shkreli did, in raising a price by 5,000% and potentially killing people almost, well, you know, preventing them from living unless they sell their house and live on the street. Do you think that should be allowed? Or do you think that, you know, in the case of the UK where healthcare is made available to us through taxation, is the right way of going about it?
I think public healthcare is a very positive thing for the UK. I can't speak for the USA exactly, but I think steps do need to be taken to prevent corporate exploitation, because it will happen if it doesn't. And it probably is happening now, and it's happened in the past, like we've seen with Turing and Martin Shkreli. I think that I would like to see a national healthcare system for the US, but it would have to be very carefully planned. And with regards to the NHS in itself, like it's too inefficient, really. And I think that's another gaping problem with the NHS. It's too inefficient. It's not working because there's just nothing is balanced right now in the NHS. And I feel that about 10 years ago, used to have like hospitals, there were a fair few hospitals around, even in like some of the smaller, less populated towns. I remember going to hospitals that were a bit more local. Now everything's being centralized and they see it as this form of cost cutting. But what they don't see it as, the reason that all these waiting times and queues are absolutely like rocketing up. And then you have to consider the aging population, and then you have to consider the fact that there are more people living in the UK than in the past. Everything is incremental right now, and they have to do something about it. And what do? They carry on cutting costs by closing hospitals and closing public services that would provide those services otherwise. And the answer isn't privatization, because in a way I don't think that necessarily would be beneficial for a lot of the people in the UK. But what I do think is that there has to be a look at more efficient ways of working the NHS, because right now pumping money aimlessly into it isn't working either, especially if you don't have a clear consensus on how to spend that money. You need to have more focus on how the NHS is being run than how much money is it receiving. And so for me in particular, I have to say that I think that hospital waiting times are just a failure of governments, and in a way cost cutting in the wrong places. They say they're pumping money into the NHS, but why then are the services in a way decreasing that are being offered by the NHS?
You made a lot of interesting points there. To go over it is that as you were saying, in terms of government spending less, or saying they're pumping money into the NHS, but then where are they pumping that in? Because we are experiencing an NHS that is less efficient. We are experiencing higher prices. We are experiencing an aging population also. In the last year, there was £140 billion spent, which is 10 times more than 60 years ago when adjusted for inflation.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we are experiencing something that is inefficient. And to talk about governments pumping money into the NHS, I think it is also an important case to be made. Not to make this Politicast in any way a politically biased podcast, that the most recent government, the Tory government, I don't have the exact statistics, but I saw a graph on this when researching the topic, have pumped in significantly less money than their previous governments.
I mean, it's one of those really tricky ones. Obviously there is currently an economic deficit and a debt that needs to be cleared, and we all understand that. But there's also a humanistic problem as well. And so you have to balance the economy with the humanity. And the NHS is currently suffering quite badly, which then affects the humanity. The largest gaping hole in the NHS is just the inefficiency. It's a lumbering mess right now, and the government think that every single time there's a problem, they can just throw money at it and it'll go away.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, look, we're throwing money at the NHS. NHS gets more money, and the issues are going to just dissolve. That's never the case. And that is the issue with this Conservative government, unlike previous Conservative governments. Now, I have never been a Conservative, and I don't know if I'll ever will be, but previous Conservative governments knew how to spend money. Most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. Like, I don't agree with every decision they ever made, but I know why they did it, and I understand the logic behind it. The recent governments have just said, oh, we're just going to throw money at it, and money's going to solve it. But it's not about how much you spend, it's about how you spend it. And that is the current problem, and the recurring issue with the last 7 years of government, or however long since we've had the economic crash, that no one knows how to spend the money and invest the money properly to the point where we're clearing a debt. They said they'd clear it by 2015. Then it's 2020. That's 2025. It's always going up because they don't know how to spend that money, despite looking like we should be clearing the debt sooner than we actually are. I do not believe the government is spending the money in the most sensible way. And I think one of the best examples that defines the failure to spend money properly is foreign aid, in which basically the government just throws money at foreign governments and says, here, have the money, despite the fact that we give foreign aid to countries that still neglect to feed the poorest people. Despite the aid we give them, we give foreign aid to India, and they have their own bloody space program. You have to ask yourself a question when you're throwing money at this place, and there's these people who clearly aren't using it properly, that you have to understand that there is an issue of management, and you either hire people to make sure that money is spent effectively, or you need to review whether you should be spending that money there at all.
I think you made some very good points there. I can't really comment so much on the point about India because I had no idea that they had their own space program. That's incredible. But I think, we've had a good discussion on this. I'm glad that we've raised the point of private versus public healthcare and some of the issues that we have here in the UK. Less so talking about the issues in the US, because I can admit that I do not know too much about the case with Obamacare, what's happening with Obamacare at the moment. I do know that the issue that fell through, but when their website wasn't even working, I find that fairly humorous, that something so important organised by the government can be fucking, it's practically a troll. But I'm glad that we've gone into this discussion, and thank you for your comments on the NHS. And with that, I think it's about time that we pull this podcast to a close. We hope you've enjoyed it. Let us know in the comment section down below what kind of topics you preferred in this video, because I know we went through a lot. If you preferred the points that we made about the YouTube drama as such, or the Twitter drama, or the things that hit the real life news. I've been James Marriott, and I've been with my co-host, The Right Opinion.
I'd love to say something, but I don't really know what to say. I'm just going to say, I'll see you in the next one, providing that this one doesn't do shit and I don't lose my patience.
In that case, this would have been The Right Opinion on the wrong podcast.
Yes.
But thank you very much, and we'll catch you in the next one.